What's kicking, everybody? We are back for another episode of Pickin' Fights. I'm Keith, joined finally again by my intrepid co-host, Tom. Tom, how are you today?
Intrepid? What a word. What does that word mean?
I think it means, I don't know. I mean, I know that it's the name of a famous warship, and I've heard other people use it. So I know it's
Got it.
very complimentary, though.
Sorry, didn't mean to call your bluff at 8:40 this morning. Glad to be back. Watched the episode last week. Loved some of the jokes you were throwing at me. Like the big hat. I was sunburned. I'm now peeling all over my shoulders. I had a nice bubble blister on my shoulder that I picked off last night. So I'm feeling a little bit more tan, if anyone can tell. I got new AirPods for Easter, so it's been rolling really well. And last week we'll just call that a wash since I wasn't here. But this far, I think on the Bilal Muhammad card, I went something like 10-1, 9-1, something like that. So I'm feeling pretty good, ready to keep everything rolling and hopefully ignite the spark again and have some good bets here. Last week wasn't the best. I knew there were some upsets. We had a finish in a female fight, which kind of goes against my rule that it never be finished, but it was Jessica Andrade, first round standing triangle. That was nuts. I think it was probably the first one ever, I think they were saying. So definitely something, historic in some regards. But yeah, I'm excited for this upcoming fight. This one, I think last week, I watched the whole card, but last week, Jessica Andrade doesn't get me warm and fuzzy inside when it's the main event. It's not something that I'm going to be looking forward to for days, if not weeks beforehand. However, Marlon Vera versus Rob Font is something that when it's going to be main event time, you're going to have kind of the butterflies in your belly, the sweaty palms, because you know that this is a make it or break it fight. The winner goes on to much bigger and better things. They could potentially be in title contention or one fight removed from a title contender. A fight for the belt, whereas the other guy is going to definitely have to take a step down in competition here. Both guys have been fighting for a long time. Vera seems like he is a guy who's maybe been in the UFC by the amount of fights and what we've seen in the UFC. You think maybe he should be like 35, but he's really only 29, and a lot of people forget that. So he's still consistently getting better. I listened to the whole 3.5-hour podcast with him and Joe Rogan, so I'm really, really interested to get into this fight and break it down. And Rob Font is a great technical boxer style that did really well against Jose Aldo for the majority of the fight. So really interested to talk about this one with you, Keith.
Okay, so real quick, intrepid, fearless, adventurous. That's the definition right there. You could also call Chito Vera intrepid. He's super fearless and adventurous. Doesn't really say no to anybody. Is willing to fight just about anyone. Has a great resume so far, working his way up in the bantamweight division. So, like you said, I'm super excited for this main event. But also, there's a few others throughout the rest of this card that really get me going too. So, yeah, definitely have to bounce back after last week. That was a rough go at it. There were some that I really was hot on. Like I thought Clay Guida could pull it off against Puelles. That was disappointing. And then, when you have Jessica Andrade and Amanda Lemos in the main event, and Jessica Andrade wins by standing arm triangle, it just speaks on like how far behind some of those women's divisions are compared to like the champions of them, because Valentina Shevchenko is super dominant and would never lose by standing arm triangle. And then, you have Amanda Lemos, who is like trying to work her way up and just gets embarrassed, losing by something that you should never get caught up in. So we're moving on now, though. We're on to this week, this Marlon Vera versus Rob Font card. And we'll kick it off like we always do with our prelim locks. So actually, shout out to our boy in Fuego. He hit me in the Twitter DMs and was like, "Yo, you have to look at Gina Mazzani this week." And so I'm rolling with Gina Mazzani for my prelim lock. This is a pick that I actually really like because she has a way better resume than Shayna Young. It's miles apart. She's fought better competition throughout her career. Both women are both like pretty subpar, but they have records of 7-5 and 7-4. But Mazzani has wins over Rachel Ostovich, Yan Wu, and losses to Macy Chiasson, as well as the current champ Juliana Pena on their season of The Ultimate Fighter. and she's got a great team around her. She trains with James Krause and at Extreme Couture, and she's shorter only by an inch, but she has almost a 4-inch reach advantage over Shanna Young. So I really like the Mazzani pick here. She's only a slight favorite, so there's definitely money to be made. And based off your theory that almost all women's fights go to decision, then I'll be taking Gina Mazzani to win this fight by decision. What do you think of that pick?
Yeah, I'm with you. Gina Mazzani, now she's someone who is super cut up. She is a female fighter who you'll go in there and she'll look super jacked. And it's, some people like it, some people don't like it. It's really in the eye of the beholder. But aside from that, you have Shanna Young, the Shanimal, who's coming down from 135, and she's had limited success kind of in both divisions. I don't think there's a whole lot that Shanna's going to have for Gina Mazzani. Now, the problem with Gina is that she can be chinny at times, which, can not necessarily lend itself to my idea that most women's fights are going to be finished. But at the end of the day, we had a finish last week. So I don't think that that's a train that we're going to see a lot of. Gina, in her last fight, lost by standing TKO from punches to Priscilla Cachoeira. Listen, I think at the end of the day, Gina's just had a little bit better competition. Like you said, Keith, I think she is a little bit better on the feet. And I think she is ultimately going to take this one coming in at a minus 155, a slight favorite. She's over at Extreme Couture, so she is at a, I guess, more established gym, you could say, than the Knoxville Martial Arts Academy that the Shanimal is coming out of. I just don't like some of the losses that Shanna Young has had, in the lesser promotions and the lesser competition. So I'm going to go with Gina Mazzani, and looking at Tapology, of the 961 people who have voted, 83% are on Mazzani, and only 17% on Young. Most of those going by decision. So I would say Mazzani by decision. But I think the overall safer play would probably be just this fight ending in decision. Maybe throw that into a parlay. And that's really kind of where I'm going on this fight. Now, moving on to the next fight that I want to call a lock. It may come up on the main card. It may come up on the undercard. According to all the sites now, it may be on the undercard. But, the UFC, I think they changed up their main event last week, like 20 minutes before the main card started or something like that. So you never know what's going to happen. So I'm just going to throw this one in here with our locks. And that's going to be Alexander Romanov over Chase Sherman. Romanov coming in at 15-0. He's slimmed down. He's jacked up. He's been working on the wrestling. Chase Sherman, we could just say that there's better prospects in the UFC. And there's not that many worse prospects than Chase Sherman at this point in his career. I mean, this is a guy who, he's fought some people and rarely looked good against them. He's got a loss to Andrei Arlovski, Parker Porter, who, Parker Porter's not necessarily somebody that I'm super high on either in the heavyweight division. Collier, a guy who's fighting in the main event against Andrei Arlovski later. He lost to him by, first round rear naked choke. He has the win over Ike Villanueva, but we saw Ike Villanueva just have his front leg smashed in the first round and get finished last week. So I don't see a lot of positives coming for Chase Sherman here. First name Jonathan, actually. But the Vanilla Gorilla, I think this one, I think, Keith, you were mentioning it in the pre-show that, some lines, even some books even stopped allowing you to bet on Alexander Romanov because they just kind of didn't want to take a bath. And some people were even speculating that maybe that's why it got pulled, because Chase Sherman had a minor injury, but then they rebooked it for the next week. Either way, maybe that's in intervening of Vegas. Maybe it's not, who knows? But I'm going to take Alexander Romanov. I think you were telling me earlier that you had him by submission. I'm going to take Alexander Romanov, first round finish. I'm going to take that one and add it to a parlay, potentially with the Gina Mazzani fight going to the distance. And I feel like those are two really, really safe plays to start off the main card. What do you think, Keith?
Oh, I love the pick. It's a shame because last week Alexander Romanov came into this one, this matchup at minus 1,200. And now those odds have basically doubled or halved, however you look at it. So he's now minus 2,300. Anybody out there that's a little bit newer to this game, that means that you would have to put $2,300 on Alexander Romanov straight up to win $100. So as opposed to 1,200 to win 100, that's extremely steep compared to last week. But I still really like the pick. And, like you said, Alexander Romanov, he's really gotten into extremely great physical shape. He's kept a similar weight, it seems like, but now he's just jacked out of his mind as opposed to, he was a big guy before. But, I said it last week, the reason that I like Alexander Romanov to win by submission is because of a few factors. Chase Sherman's gotten locked up in a couple of chokes over his last couple fights. He's very much like a Jared Bandera type of guy where once you take him to the ground, he doesn't really have anything for you if you are superior in the grappling and the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And Alexander Romanov is also a guy that's locked up a few chokes. I'm going to speak about this later with another guy on this card, but he's got good fight IQ where after he drops you, and rather than just trying to get on top and ground and pound where you can potentially cover up and recover a little bit, he jumps right on top while you're winded, while you're a little bit out of it, locks up, various different chokes. So, that's why I'm rolling with that. I'm going to just double down on what you said in the first round, and I'm actually going to go Alexander Romanov by submission in round one. That'll probably be still like minus 560 or something crazy like that. But I do like that pick quite a bit, and I'll be taking that. You have to parlay it to make it worthwhile for yourself. So I do like that Gina Mazzani parlay. So I think that's a smart move. I think that's really smart. So I'll be rolling with you on that pick.
Awesome. Well, so I have a couple more prelim locks. Well, I have one more lock, and it's partly because I have these theories, right? Most women's fights go to decision. Betting on them to go the distance if you're not sure who's going to win generally pays out well. Sometimes it depends on the fighter. Valentina Shevchenko, a lot of times Jessica Andrade. The competition really matters and who you're fighting on, but by and large, women's fights do go to the distance more often than they don't. Also, another big superstition of mine, knock on wood, not knocking on wood, that's another superstition, neither here nor there, is that if a sibling is good in the UFC, the other sibling, by the transitive property, cannot. And I'm not even sure if I've used that correctly. It's been quite some time since I took, is that geometry, algebra, trig? Who knows? At the end of the day, I just think Deiveson Figueiredo got most, if not all, of the talent in the Figueiredo family, and his brother Francisco Figueiredo, sniper, I don't think has much for Daniel De Silva, just on a straight fighting, one-to-one comparison. I think Daniel De Silva is a better fighter, but I also think when you add in the issues with, that sibling rivalry and who's better in the family and can one be good while the other isn't. Listen, Figueiredo's a champion right now. So maybe if this fight had happened right before the Brandon Moreno loss, or right after the Brandon Moreno loss, maybe then, I'd be more inclined to go with Francisco. But because his brother is the champion, because he's one of the best flyweights in the world, I'm going to go with Daniel De Silva getting the job done. Looking at Tapology, they're definitely betting against me. They're betting against me 60% to 40% of nearly 1,000 votes. So almost 600 people are betting against me, but 400 people are betting with me. So a lot of guys thinking this is going to go to decision here. But yeah, I would definitely sprinkle a little bit on Daniel De Silva. I'm not super duper confident here, but I do kind of want to stay with my ideas and with my strategy about the siblings. And it really hasn't failed me. I can't name a single time where it's failed me. So again, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't start now, but I'm going to go with Daniel De Silva versus Francisco Figueiredo. I think a lot of the bettors and the lines, they just see Figueiredo and they want to bet on it. Oh, he's a sibling, he's got to do it. And I think ultimately Vegas cashes in on a lot of those. So I'm going with Daniel De Silva.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And your theory has been ringing true a lot recently. We saw Chris Daukaus, getting demolished by Curtis Blades, while Kyle is having a little bit more success in his career right now. So much to the point where Chris Daukaus may even go down to light heavyweight. And I've never been particularly impressed with Francisco Figueiredo. It's one of those things like, hey, can you put my brother on too? Like, I think it might work out. I'd really appreciate it.
Kind of what the Diaz brothers do.
Yeah.
Hey, not my brother, Nick and Nate, but, like some of the guys that come out of their gym. Now, Nick Maximov, I think he's got a fight next weekend. Right. So I'm excited to see what he does. And, he did perform well. But the Diaz army is kind of notable for, on a Diaz fight, putting in some guys from their card, whether they deserve it or not, whether they get wins or not. I think Nick Maximov was like 4-1 and hadn't fought in 2 years and entered the card. So it's like, yeah, he won, great, and he is a good fighter. But at the end of the day, like, if he wasn't a part of the Nick Diaz team, is a 4-2 fighter coming off a loss 2 years ago really going to make his way onto a UFC card, pay-per-view no less?
You got to put on for your squad.
Fair enough. Okay, there's one other prelim fight that I want to hit on, and that's going to be Johan Lainez versus Gabe Green. And the reason is in some of the research that we were doing before the fights, I had learned that Gabe Green had been out for a significant amount of time. He actually he got eye surgery, so maybe that could help him, right? Get LASIK and see better. But also he's very hittable, and he had nearly a heart attack a couple months ago. So this is a guy who's been out of fighting for a year. It was a unanimous decision win against Philip Rowe. And then in his first UFC fight a year and 10 months ago, he fought Daniel Rodriguez. He lost. He came in on short notice, but I think a lot of people are high on him because of that. But here's the thing. Gabe Green gets hit a lot, and Yair Rodriguez, I think, almost set a record for the amount of times that he hit Gabe Green. You're coming in against Johan Lainez, who is a guy who is 8-0, knocks out everybody he fights for the most part, flying knee knockouts, punches. I think he had punches to the body, cage in in CFFC, sorry. And then you knocked out Justin Burleson with a left hook on the Dana White Contender Series. This is a guy that, coming in from Canada, 29 years old, 6'1". He's going to be the much bigger guy in the fight. Height, reach. I think he's going to look ultimately like maybe he could be a weight class above. Coming in from Brazilian top team of Canada and Techno Boxing, I think he just is very, very well-rounded, and he comes in fast in the first round, and he has very heavy punches. And for a guy who's coming in after a decent layoff, but has been known to get hit a lot, it's not like, Gabe Green has necessarily chin issues, but I think Johan Lainez is just very vicious, especially in that first round. Gabe Green maybe getting back into it is a little bit more relaxed as he starts off here. So I see Johan Lainez taking the first round, potentially with the finish.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that pick. Gabe Green is so hittable. He's like one of those stand-up dummies in a kickboxing gym. Doesn't really have great head movement, doesn't really maintain distance well, and stays within striking range a lot of the time. And Johan Lainez, like you said, he's vicious. He's going to go in there and he's going to attack. And when you're super hittable, even if he doesn't win this one by finish, and, Gabe Green, his chin holds up, he doesn't have any issues after he's hit. I think it comes down to it where the striking numbers are going to be so vastly different. It's going to be a crazy difference in the numbers by the end of this fight, no matter how it ends for Johan Lainez. So I really like that pick.
And one more thing for Gabe Green, the last time he was knocked out, 2017, Bellator 170 by a guy by the name of Jalen Turner, who we know for having massive power. So, if a guy has big enough power, he can knock him out. I'm liking Johan Lainez by finish.
Wow. Okay. See, just to be a little bit, on the opposite side, not too far, I'm actually going to take Johan Lainez by decision. And that's because I don't know if he has the same power as Jalen Turner, but I still like your pick regardless. Gabe Green, maybe as time has gone on, a little bit more chinny potentially, but I like that he holds up, and I just think that when it comes down to it, the striking numbers and the significant strikes are going to be so much more in favor of Johan Lainez. So great pick regardless if you're taking Lainez this week. So now we can move on to the main card. That was your last one, right? I believe that's
yes, sir.
All the prelims right there. So. We're going to start it off with Gerald Meerschaert versus Krzysztof Jotko, and I'm rolling with Meerschaert here. And I think this is one of those ones that, some guys have a negative highlight, and it really stands out in people's minds and makes them think differently of a fighter for the rest of their career. And that definitely rings true for Meerschaert because, we saw it 2 weeks ago with Khamzat Chimaev. That highlight of him getting knocked out by Khamzat played over and over and over, so much so to the point that Meerschaert was tweeting like, new drinking game. Every time they show the highlight of me versus Hamzat, take a shot and you'll be pretty drunk. But, this is one of those things that that highlight sticks out in so many people's minds. And that's probably why Meerschaert is a slight underdog in this fight, because, people just remember what sticks out to them. But Meerschaert, going into this one, has shared the octagon with the way better competition out of the two of these guys. And he has a serious ground advantage, in my opinion. I think maybe he would have been able to hold up with Hamzat if that fight had gone a little bit longer. But he does have a serious ground advantage over Krzysztof Jotko here. He's won his last 3 fights by way of choke because, like I said before, he's got really good fight IQ because his hands do work. And he does have the ability to drop somebody with his hands, and rather than letting them, try and shell up, survive a ground and pound attack, he just dives right in there and locks up their neck and cuts off circulation and breathing from their head. So I really like Gerald Meerschaert in this one, and I actually do like him to win by submission here over Krzysztof Jotko. What do you think of that one?
I like the pick, but I like the finish aspect of it. I may be a little bit more broad and just go with GM3 by finish. Here's the thing. Krzysztof Jotko is not necessarily somebody who's been known by and large. I said by and large twice now. I've never said that before in my life. I don't know what's happening. I think my freshman gambling professor, yes, that was a class I took at the University of Maryland. My freshman year was Introduction to Gambling and Horse Betting. We didn't talk too much about MMA, but he said by and large a lot. So maybe I'm just summoning him. Thank you, Professor. Couldn't remember his last name if you paid me. Krzysztof Jotko, not a guy that we are known for, finishing fights here. Alan Amedovski, decision. Marc-Andre Barriault, split decision. Eric Anders, decision. He had the loss to Sean Strickland, decision. And then Misha Shirkinov, the split decision. And I think there's a lot of people who could say that maybe Misha Shirkinov, guys, it's 8:30 in the morning. I'm going to slur words, I guess. I'm not drunk, I promise. Listen, I think Krzysztof Jotko is not a guy that we're going to expect to get a lot of finishes inside the UFC, and GM3 coming off that loss against Hamzat Chimaev. He has his submission, 1, 2, 3 submissions. His hands do work. I'm going to take him. A lot of people like submission, but I think there's a possibility that he could actually drop Krzysztof Jotko and make this his fight. So I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go with you in GM3. I'm going to go by the finish or go by finish. Maybe it probably will be a submission. I didn't realize the discrepancy here as much, but yeah, I like GM3. I like GM3 a lot. I like the run he's been on. I think he's kind of ascending upwards, even though Krzysztof Jotko is the favorite here. -170 is what I'm seeing. I'm going to go with GM3. 60% of the Tapology voters have GM3 as well. 1,038 of them totally voting, but 40% going with Jotko. So I think a lot of these fights we can get some good money, some good value on. Even the pick'em fights that I think should have a little bit more discrepancy, the main card, I think, or a main event rather. I think there's a lot of opportunity to win some money here. So I'm going with GM3 out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin with you, Keith.
Yeah, I like the pick a lot, especially that juicy underdog money line. So next up, moving on up to Darren Elkins versus Tristan Connelly. And talk about a pick'em fight. This is definitely somewhat of a pick'em fight. Closer odds in this one. Darren Elkins coming in at a -140 favorite, and Tristan Connelly at +115. So, somewhat of an even line across the board for these guys. But this is a little bit tougher of a fight for me to pick. So I'm going to take the fight to go the distance, personally. And I think that Darren Elkins is going to get it done. I think that this is another guy that maybe people aren't super hot on him after he got knocked out by Cub Swanson. But he does have more experience against the better competition throughout the course of his career. But, like I said, this is a tough fight. This really is a pick'em fight. So I do like this one to go the distance. I think that both of these men are going to be, not too overly aggressive. They're going to be a little bit more cautious of each other's power. Darren Elkins, we've seen him do some crazy things to guys in the past. So, I'm gonna take this fight to go the distance, and I think I'm gonna take Darren Elkins to win it. But yeah, this is a tough one. This is a really hard one to pick. This is one of those ones that I said I was going to do on the spot to myself ahead of time. And the only one, I mean, you could go with Tristan Connelly here because he has, that win over Michel Pereira that looked really good, win by decision. So, I don't know if Tristan Connelly necessarily has the finishing power to, knock Darren Elkins out. Darren Elkins definitely has heavy hands that could do damage to Tristan Connelly and keep him, on his back foot throughout this fight. So, yeah, I think that this fight to go the distance is probably a really smart play, and I'm just going to lean towards Darren Elkins here. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I am going to lean towards, and how do I get my face to show here? Come on, guys. All right, we'll just do this then. All right, yeah, I'm going to go with Tristan Connelly. And there's a couple reasons for that. And I think that he's looked good in all of his UFC fights so far, Michel Pereira being most notable, but also the Pat Sabatini fight. We've seen Pat Sabatini go on and do a lot of really good things and a lot of really controlling things inside the UFC. I also like how Tristan Connelly doesn't have the wear and tear on him like Darren Elkins does. I mean, his name is literally The Damage. I'm not sure why Tapology has a picture up without the damage tattoo. It seems like a really big missed opportunity and a missed significant part of who this fighter's identity is. He literally got his nickname tattooed on him. Now, over time, I'm not sure if damage was to allude to what he inflicts or what gets inflicted upon him. But he, in his last few fights, we've really seen Darren Elkins take some damage and take some shots that, previously wouldn't do as much to him. He lost to Ryan Hall and Nate Landwehr. But the punches and the wheel kick that ultimately finished him against Cub Swanson. Now, Cub Swanson, another guy who's aging, still has powerful hands, but a lot of the shots leading up to that first round knockout were hurting Darren in a way that we didn't normally see earlier in his career. So for that reason, Tristan Connelly, he does have the ability, he does have powerful hands, and I think he does finish this one. I'm not sure if it's going to be ultimately finished, or I'm sorry, not finish this one. I'm sorry, I think he will win this one. I'm not sure if ultimately he is going to have it be finished, but I do like Darren Elkins to lose this one moving forward. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I think Tristan, coming in, he's the Canadian. Canadians are potentially on the rise here in the UFC. We've seen a few have a lot of success. And nickname Boondock, I think, is one of the more fun ones. Reminds me of the Boondocks, the cartoon. So, yeah, I'm going with Tristan Connelly here, Keith.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I respect the pick. I think it's going to go the distance. That's probably like my main pick for this one, just because I think it's a lot closer of a fight than I would like it to be. But we'll move on up to now Jared Flash Gordon versus Grant Dawson. And this is another one that I'm a little bit conflicted on. So I'm going to flip it over to you first. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, a lot of conflicts for you on this card this week, this early Tuesday morning, but I'm going to go with Grant Dawson here, and I feel pretty confident in that. He's 17-1-1. His one loss is outside the UFC, and has been a long time ago, over 3 years ago, and his one decision came against Ricky Glenn. Now, in that Ricky Glenn fight was something really interesting, where he actually won the first 2 rounds and then lost the final round via 10-8. And the reason I think that he was so susceptible to losing that 10-8 is because it wasn't necessarily a cardio issue, but more of a pacing issue against David Grant. And we've seen David Grant. David Grant has legitimate power in his hands. He has really good stand-up striking ability. So I think Grant Dawson was a little bit more concerned about that. So he had to, be more careful and had to shoot some takedowns that maybe he wouldn't have normally done, and really had to work hard to get those takedowns. Now, granted, when he did get those takedowns, he dished out a lot of damage. That's kind of his thing. I hate to keep saying the word damage, but Grant Dawson, when he has ground and pound, it's really the word that's most synonymous with what this guy fights like. So I think he's going to have a lot of success taking down Jared Flash Gordon. And Gordon is a guy who, both of these guys, I think they used to compete. They're competing right now at 55. They used to compete at 45, so it's not like there's going to be a size discrepancy. I think Davey Grant was the bigger guy in that battle. He had a longer reach, so that was another thing that Grant Dawson had to take, into account when fighting. I think Jared Flash Gordon isn't going to pose the same issues for Grant Dawson that Davey Grant did. Jared Gordon is not. He's well rounded, but he's not particularly great or good at any particular thing. So I think Grant Dawson, who is good at getting the takedown and dishing the ground and pound, as long as he can keep that pace, keep that up for 3 rounds, I think he's going to have a really, really good chance to win this one by decision. But I think there's also a really strong chance that he takes this one by a TKO finish. So, as time gets later in the week, I think we may have a better idea of what's going to happen. But yeah, I like Grant Dawson a lot in this one.
Yeah, that's who I was leaning towards. And, for me, I was conflicted because I am a Flash Gordon fan. He's not the best guy out there, but he is entertaining and he has a pretty good story going behind him. If you haven't heard his story as a fan, you should definitely look into that a little bit more. But yeah, Grant Dawson is the overall better fighter. He has the better resume, the better win streak and everything. And, Jared Gordon, I believe his last loss came to Charles Oliveira. So, it's not like Jared Gordon's bad by any means. And I think that's probably why this is so close, in terms of the lines. But, yeah, I'm gonna tail you with that one on Grant Dawson, just because come Monday or come Sunday morning, I don't want to be wrong and have you be right and gloat. So I'd rather we both be wrong together than you be wrong, or you be right and me be wrong. So that being said, I'm just gonna tail Grant Dawson here because you're taking Grant Dawson, and I'd feel pretty silly if I took Flash Gordon just because I'm a fan of his. So next up, we've got Andrei Fili. Some of these nicknames you have to say with the name. So we've got Andrei Fili versus Joanderson Britto. And, this guy Britto, his last fight was his UFC debut after the Contender Series. Wasn't really impressive whatsoever. Lost that fight. And then you've got Andrei Fili, who is one of these guys that, is like, middling out there in the featherweight division. But he doesn't really say no to fighting just about anybody. He'll, step in there with whoever the UFC gives them. And I think that they may be using Joanderson Britto to build up Andrei Fili a little bit more, especially after seeing Britto. He's like pretty lackluster, probably won't make it past, his second contract in the UFC. And Andrei Fili he's got way better hands. His striking ability is really great. So I'm rolling with Andrei Fili here. I don't think that, Joanderson Britto really has anything for him whatsoever. And Vegas agrees because Andrei Fili is minus 275 here. So not a lot of money to be made if you take the straight up money line. But I actually like Fili to win this one by decision because Joanderson Britto, he has a decent chin. He showed that in his last fight. So, rolling with Fili here potentially to win by decision. What do you think about this pick, Tom?
Yeah, I'm going Fili, and there's a few reasons for that, and you hit a lot of them. But Joanderson Britto, like you said, last fight, Bill Algeo, lost unanimous decision. Bill Algeo, solid guy, middling guy, right now in the UFC. But the Diego Lopez, he won it by a technical unanimous decision. I mean, it's really hard to read into those, especially when they end early in those technical unanimous decisions, where they go off the cards. But I mean, it's just, especially on the Contender Series, like if you want me to have really big hype behind you, it's you got to really get those done. And then just outside of that, the Legacy Fighting Alliance and the future MMA, like, he's fighting guys with good records, but without really doing a deep dive into their background, it's hard to really judge the caliber of fighter that he's fighting against. Could these be, boxing style guys who, have 8 fights, all with a combined record of 3-27, and then they, fight somebody like Joanderson Britto. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not saying Joanderson Britto is a bad fighter, but push come to shove, I don't think he has the level of Andrei Fili. I mean, we're looking back at his 2 most recent losses, or to Sadiq Youssef, a guy with 1 loss, has been in the UFC for some time now, and Bryce Mitchell, a guy with no losses. And, he had put up a pretty solid fight with Bryce Mitchell. He went all the way to decision, and we saw Bryce Mitchell go out there and in a lot of people's eyes, probably should have finished his last opponent. So, And then he has got, the Daniel Pineda, the no contest or the decision. What do they even call this? A draw due to the accidental eye poke. I think Andrei Fili is a guy who's got a lot more experience, a lot more talent. He's going to be the longer guy. He's coming from Team Alpha Male, who we've seen, get some wins recently. Yeah, I like Andrei Fili in this one. Looking down at Tapology, of the 1,000 people who voted so far, 88% of them also going with Andrei Fili. But they're definitely giving Britto his due diligence and thinking this one's going to go the distance here.
Yeah, I mean, touchy-feely, his chin is great. And, one thing you have to keep in mind, he does have a win over some people's GOAT, Artem Lobov. So touchy-feely is definitely going to get this one done here. Yeah, his resume is great. Win over Charles Jourdain. He's been in there with Michael Johnson, had a loss, but, we saw Michael Johnson at that point in his career could really stand and bang with some of the best of them, like Justin Gaethje. So, and he wasn't finished by Michael Johnson. So I think that touchy-feely is a really smart pick here. So moving on up, we have Jake Collier versus Andrei Arlovski. And first and foremost, I do want to say MMA math, it doesn't always work out, but Jake Collier has a loss to Carlos Felipe, and Andrei Arlovski has a win over him. So that's just the first thing to get it out of the way. But Andrei Arlovski, we all know he's old. He doesn't look as old as Alexei Oleinik when he's out there fighting. He still looks like he's a bit spry and athletic for a guy that's like 45 years old. But, I just think Andrei Arlovski at this point, he's got a pretty complete game for, an older guy. He can stand, he can grapple. And I don't think that Jake Collier is going to have anything for him. We're seeing this resurgence of Andrei Arlovski. He's on a 3-fight win streak right now. And Jake Collier is one of those like middling out guys that, we've seen him bounce around in weight classes. He's come up, he was a middleweight at one point and put on a lot of weight to fight at heavyweight now. I think Andrei Arlovski is going to have a pretty definitive win against Jake Collier. He's going to get it done pretty much whichever way he wants to. You look at Jake Collier's most recent fights. He has wins over Chase Sherman. We spoke about how he's pretty bad. He has a win over Jean Vellante, who I believe was cut from the UFC after that loss to Chris Barnett. And he lost to Tom Aspinall in the first round, which, Tom Aspinall could be a potential future champ. But, it doesn't really speak to Jake Collier as a great fighter, just getting put down in the first round. Other than that, his resume is like pretty unimpressive. And Andrei Arlovski is one of these guys. He's got the experience. He's got a complete game plan. And I don't think that Jake Collier is any match for him whatsoever. I do like Andrei Arlovski's line here at -140. I mean, being with what I said, that he could get it done whichever way he wants. At -140, that money line looks really good on its own or in a parlay. Like that's a great boost to it. And I think that this is just going to be a definitive win. Potentially a finish for Arlovski, but because he's so complete and he's a little bit older, he's not super chinny in his old age, and I don't think that Jake Collier even has the power to put Andrei Arlovski away. With a punch on his feet, he doesn't have the grappling to put him away with a submission on the ground. Like he does have that choke win over Chase Sherman, but we said, Chase Sherman basically just leaves his neck exposed when he's rolling around on the ground. So Andrei Arlovski money line. That's my pick for this one. He's going to get it done one of three ways, and I can't decide which one. So I'm taking Andrei Arlovski straight up here.
Yeah, I think you and me might be a little bit in the minority thinking that. Listen, Tapology has it at 80% or higher, 84% on Arlovski to getting it done at the ripe old age of 43. I think a lot of that has to do with the level of competition that Jake Collier has fight and lost to, and even his wins, level of competition wins is not showing me a lot. But then, you go and look at the Pitbull. He's got wins over Jared Vanderaa, who's it was a split decision, and Jared Vanderaa is not necessarily a guy that you think of when you think of top-level competition. And that was 2 months ago that he's coming in. Now, 43 years old, coming in just over 10 weeks. So you got out of camp and you're right back into camp. I mean, I know that you guys are going, you're at the heavyweight limit. So it's not like there's a whole lot of cutting weight that necessarily has to happen here. But, it is something to, bring a little bit of cause for concern, not for the people of Tapology, but I've seen a couple people around the internet, putting some money on Jake Collier, Collier. But here's my philosophy on that. I have such a more broad body of work for Andrei Arlovski, and we've seen him be a lot more patient in this second stage of his career here, that I have a lot more confidence in him to not necessarily make mistakes, to figure out the puzzle that may or may not be Jake Collier. So I know they have a lot of some of the same competition. I mean, both having wins over, or both beat Chase Sherman, but I don't know how much that really says to you. And then, we have a Carlos Felipe loss for Jake, and then a win, obviously, for Andrei Arlovski. Carlos Felipe, a guy who, not sure if he's in the UFC anymore. So when we talk about a career resurgence for Andrei Arlovski, I'm not entirely sure that that's really accurate considering the level of competition he's fought, but he is still out there getting wins. He's 43 years old, so give credit where credit is due. We've seen plenty of guys like Glover Teixeira, not plenty, but guys like Glover Teixeira have a lot of success in the heavier divisions later on in their career. So I'm going to ride with you. I'm going to go Andrei Arlovski here. I'm not super duper confident, but when looking at the lines here that are fairly close, like near even, I'm going to have to put my money on the fighter with the wider fight experience, wider fight IQ. I think there's a lot of things that Andrei Arlovski has accrued in his time in the cage that he's going to use against Jake Collier here. So I'm riding with you, Andrei Arlovski, money line.
Yeah, that was definitely a really great way to say it. The body of work is there for Andrei Arlovski. That's the term that I was looking for. And, you go further back into his career, he's fought the better competition long term, like Jairzinho Rosenstrike and Ben Rothwell, guys like that he was in there with. And yeah, Andrei Arlovski is one of those guys that as he's gotten older, he's gotten wiser. And to your point that he's not going to make mistakes, or not as many mistakes as Collier, I really like that. So yeah, I'm rolling with Arlovski here. So now we're on to the main event. We've got Rob Font versus Marlon Cheeto Vera. And I'm rolling with Cheeto Vera. I think that Cheeto Vera is, he's one of these guys in the bantamweight division that, he's going to be up there in the top, like the very, very top very soon. I've really been impressed with Cheeto Vera over his past couple fights. The people of Tapology don't seem to be as impressed. The majority of them actually have Rob Font winning, and I think there's a few reasons why, possibly. Rob Font did show us that, I believe it was in his fight against Cody Garbrandt, that he can wrestle a little bit. He can do a little bit more, in terms of just a complete game plan than we expected from him just as a boxer. But for some reason, there's guys that are really good at wrestling too that were scared to try and take Cheeto Vera down. One being Frankie Edgar was a little bit precautious of going to the ground with Cheeto Vera, and ultimately Cheeto made him into a meme with the front kick there in that fight. But I really like Cheeto Vera. He's a guy that he'll fight anyone in this division. They gave him Sean O'Malley when Sean O'Malley is a guy that they just set up against who they see as cans. They gave Sean O'Malley to Cheeto Vera, and Cheeto Vera, finished him with that like iffy leg kick, potential injury, but really just won that.
Also vicious elbows.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Won it with the ground and pound with the elbows. And then he's been in there with Song Yadong as well. Both of these guys, Rob Font and Cheeto Vera, have losses to Jose Aldo. But one of the things you got to watch out for with Rob Font is that was his last fight in December, I believe. And he took a lot of damage against Jose Aldo. And even though that one was in December, it still feels a little bit too soon for Rob Font to be coming back, after all that damage. Like, that chin, it can only absorb so much. And a guy like Jose Aldo, who was landing as many punches on Rob Font as he wanted to in rapid succession in Jose Aldo fashion, It just feels like maybe Rob Font is going to come back with some chin issues here. I think Chito Vera, he's got a lot of the intangibles too that Rob Font doesn't necessarily have. Like you said, you listen to that Joe Rogan podcast with Chito Vera, and Chito Vera, he's another guy with an incredible story, has a lot to fight for, and I don't really see him being that guy that, like, okay, yeah, you lose to Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is one of the GOATs, in my opinion. Been doing this forever. You're not going to lose to Rob Font, Chito. Like, there's no way. So I'm taking Chito Vera here at this one. This is a pick'em fight by its truest definition. 115 across the board for both of these guys. But I really like Chito Vera to get this one done. I think he'll actually end up piecing up Rob Font on the ground for a good portion of this fight, probably winning, 3 out of 5 rounds for Chito Vera, because this one is a close fight. But I do like Chito Vera quite a bit here. I'm tempted to put Chito Vera by knockout as well, but I'm just going to take Chito Vera straight up just because that line is pretty nice. What do you think about that one, Tom?
Yeah, that's a really good analysis here, but I do want to push back on, I am going with Chito Vera as well, but one thing I want to push back on you with is that, Chito Vera has a lot of late round finishes or late fight finishes in his career, and I think that lends itself really nicely to what's going to be now his first 5th-round fight or 5-round fight here. Now, Rob Font, we saw him kind of have one of his lesser performances against Jose Aldo. We saw him get stunned and wobbled a few times, and I think that maybe is an indication that when Rob Font fights guys who are a little bit higher caliber when it comes to power, there's going to be issues. And Chito Vera is a guy who's always had really good power, especially in the late rounds, like I said, in his fights. So I think Chito Vera is going to be able to use his leg kicks, kind of similar to Jose Aldo. Like, you're not going to get many kicks coming back at you from Rob Font. So he's going to use his leg kicks, potentially work on the body of Rob Font, take away some of that cardio, and we're going to see the fruits of his labor really start to play out in the 3rd, in the 4th, in the 5th round. I think there's a really good situation. I think if there was a way that you could prop bet, like, who's going to win each round, I think Rob Font definitely will win the 1st round. But I think as time goes on, we start to see more and more of Chito Vera take over. He's a guy who, listen, Rob Font, everyone's talking about how Rob Font doesn't have any grappling. He doesn't have any ground game. I think Rob Font actually has a solid ground game, maybe less than par, maybe a 4 out of 10. But at the end of the day, it's not non-existent. It's still there. Chito Vera is going to be more accomplished on the ground for sure, especially from the bottom. Throwing up things like triangles and arm bars and things like that. Maybe not so arm bars from the bottom. I don't know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, Chito Vera, I think, is the much more of a submission threat than Rob Font is. I think so. He'll be better on the ground. Rob Font's going to want to keep this. And, he's got that very stand forward, heavy on the front leg boxing style that I think Chito's going to be able to eat the front leg of and then be able to work his way in. He's going to be the bigger guy, taller, rangier. And I know that they're both 5'9", so maybe not taller, but definitely have the reach advantage and the leg advantage. I like Chito Vera being a little bit more creative, throwing shots from a little bit more of awkward angles, and it's going to force Rob Font to get in a little bit closer on him. And I think that's where Chito Vera is really going to ultimately be able to do his damage. And like I said, he's a guy who has power, especially for this division. And I could see a finish for Marlon Vera in like the championship rounds here, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit hesitant on that just because it is Chito Vera's first 5-round fight. But, using the word of the day, Chito Vera is very intrepid. He is very adventurous when he's in the octagon. And, you brought up a great point. He does have a very Jose Aldo-ish style where, he starts off low and he just chops away at that front leg. And for a guy that uses such a boxing heavy front leg stance like Rob Font, that won't really bode well the same way that it did for Rob Font against Jose Aldo. So, and they have very similar styles. Sometimes you see Aldo use that front kick that Chito Vera has really shown to like to use in his past couple of fights. I really like the Chito Vera pick. Still a little bit hesitant on him to win by a finish, but we'll see as those later rounds go on. Maybe Chito Vera will impress me, and maybe he'll show that, because a lot of people, they do get into their first 5th round fight, and you can see that there's a little bit of a cardio issue as you go later on. there's a little bit of like an uncertainty, but I don't think that Chito Vera is going to be that guy. I think he's just such a killer. And he's going to be one of these guys at the top of this bantamweight division that adds to what is, almost like a murderer's row at this point, not at the same caliber of the lightweight division, but he will be up there at the top. I wouldn't be surprised if we just see him continue to climb, and Rob Font's probably another stepping stone there. So we're going to run down our picks as we always do. So for my prelim locks, I've got Gina Mazzani winning by decision. Got Alexander Romanov winning by submission. I'm going to tail you on the Johan Wynessy pick. And then I'm taking Gerald Meerschaert by submission. I'm going to go with Tristan Connelly by decision. Taking Grant Dawson. Taking Touchy Fili. Taking Andrei Arlovski. And I'm taking Chito Vera.
I am going with working from the bottom up, following you on Gina Mazzani, although I got to say, I think I'm just going to ultimately, I'll go Gina Mazzani on this one with you, but I'm also going to do that by decision. So double points, double chance, whatever the bettors call it. Gina Mazzani by decision. I like Johan Liness by finish, and I like Alexander Romanov by first round finish, and I like Daniel De Silva just money line. Moving up into the main card, I like GM3. I definitely think or not definitely, but I think that one could absolutely end in a finish. So keep an eye on that. Kind of really just depends on what the odds are. I don't have the full thing in front of me. If it makes your parlay a little sweeter and you're really liking what I'm saying and what other people around the internet are saying, then go for that GM3 by finish there. But I think the safer play is just GM3 by decision, being that Jotko isn't a guy who's known to have a lot of chin issues, and he does go to decision often. So GM3, I like Dare. Tristan Connelly, I like him. Money line. Grant Dawson, I like him. I'm kind of tempted to take Grant Dawson by finish as well because of that heavy ground and pound that he, can exude and just kind of force onto opponents. And I don't think Jared Gordon is going to have the level of grappling necessary to fend off what Grant Dawson has coming for him. I like Andrei Fili. I like him money line. I think there's a good chance that he does finish this one, but ultimately I just want to stay a little bit safer and go Andrei Fili by money line. I'm going Andrei Arlovski money line, and because that could go any which way. A guy's 43 years old, hasn't fought the best competition, but is still getting it done. Has a really strong strength of schedule. When you look at his, I think 15 to 20 year career, he's approaching some of the most fight time. I think this might be even one of the fighters who has the most amount of fight time or rounds accumulated inside the UFC octagon. So I like Andrei Arlovski. Not sure how that one's going to get it done. So safer pick is money line. And then I'm going with Marlon Vera. Again, safer pick money line, but I think this one could definitely end in a finish in the third or fourth or fifth round. So maybe go for one of those. That, I know some books will offer that 3, 4, 5 finish line. So I think that's what ultimately is going to get you done. And I saw here in the comments that we had somebody ask about what is a 3-leg can't lose parlay. Well, I'm going to go Gina Mazzani and Shana Young ending by decision. That's your number one. I am going to go with Alexander Romanov finishing Chase Sherman. That's number 2. And then as far as the third one, can't lose. Well, I'm going to go with Arlovski and Collier going to decision. I think that one, Arlovski can get it done, but I think ultimately at 43, there's going to be a lot of barriers in his way. So I would go by those 3 I would go with those 3 picks. But also, if you're feeling a little frisky, add Daniel De Silva in there, and he'll really bump up what that money line, what that parlay number is going to look like, because he's an underdog right now. And I think there's a few underdogs that we picked on this card that, can win people some money. So hopefully we stay hot, Keith.
Yeah, I hope so. So, Tom, thank you for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. And thank you, all you people at home that tuned in. Thanks for the question there, Cliff. Really appreciate it. So make sure that you like this video if you're watching on YouTube, Twitter. If you're watching it on Twitter, also, please throw us a retweet. That would be great. Subscribe on YouTube. And, continue to leave us comments down below. Follow us on our Twitters that were over here a second ago. And, follow us on @_pickandwinners. Check out the content that we do with menoforder.com, Tom's content with Overtime Heroics as well. And thank you for the continued support. You have no idea how much it means to us. Tom, thank you for joining me again.